time for the Daily Planet podcast show. So sit back, relax, and give us a go. Scott and Matt and maybe a guest, undertaking an epic pod quest. We're gonna ramble on about movies and books and television and directors and film festivals and this really long list of stuff that I know nothing about, but they gave it to me and they really wanted me to read through it. And that's all I can really say about it, but it's gonna be great. Okay, start the show.
Hello and welcome to the Daily Planet podcast, your weekly podcast for all things movies, TV, books, and anything else we feel like talking about. I am your host, Scott Daly, and I'm joined once again by my co-host and co-Netflix binger, Michael Grubb. Michael, welcome back.
That's me. Thanks. Glad to be back.
Yeah, it's been a couple weeks since we had you on because you refuse to go see Marvel movies.
I've taken a stand, as I suggested everyone do, against Marvel movies, and I will no longer be supporting them, even for the sake of artistic criticism.
Well, there you go. We offered to even pay for your ticket, and you're a man of principles. I am a man of principles, and right now I'm deciding whether I want to extend those principles to the Star Wars movies. I don't know if I'm quite. Oh, wow.
I don't know if I'm quite there yet.
Oh wow!
I still feel like I need to see them, which is just what they want, those bastards. But I think I'm almost there.
All right. Well, speaking of Star Wars, we've got some news. Wait, I didn't do this in the right order. Michael, this is our podcast.
This is our podcast.
Yeah, we're here this week to talk about Stranger Things 2, not season 2, Michael. Stranger Things 2, because you see, these aren't television shows.
Because it's a Steven Spielberg movie.
Yeah, it's just a really long movie, divided up into chunks for us.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So we were hoping to have Matt on this episode, but Matt is very busy right now and did not have time to watch Stranger Things, which is a bummer because I think out of the three of us, he was the most positive about the first season. So I was looking forward to having him kind of be the unadulterated, like, I love the show person, but that's okay. I think you and I have some interesting things to say, both good and bad, about this show.
Yeah, I agree. I think I don't think it was garbage, but there was definitely some things that can be criticized.
Yeah, so we're going to do that. We're going to talk all about Stranger Things. First, we're going to do some news, and then, of course, we're going to finish up with what we've been watching. So it's a pretty standard episode of this thing.
Don't say that. You're selling ourselves short.
Pretty standard.
This is actually an exceptional episode.
This is probably like the best episode we've ever done.
Yeah,
which is amazing that I can say that before we've actually done it. But
sometimes you just know. That's
how confident I am.
Yes.
All right, so let's do it. Let's get into the news first. Lots of crazy things happened this week, Michael. I search the internet and pull, 2 or 3 stories that I think are interesting. And this week I was like, I had 6 stories that I thought were interesting, and I had to cut it down because there's a lot of crazy news going on right now. The first thing involves your favorite company, Disney. So this is kind of a long story, actually, because back in September, the LA Times published an article about Walt Disney and basically investigating and commenting on the fact that their arrangement with the city of Anaheim, where Disneyland, the theme park, is pretty shady. One of their first examples in the article is the fact that the central Disneyland parking garage, which brings in about $35 million in annual revenue because it's like $20 a day to park there, and it's probably either half full or always full year round because so many people go to this park. It's not actually owned by Disney. This parking garage is owned by Anaheim, and they lease it to Disney at a rate of $1 a year. So there's and it dives into a lot of the shady practices where Disney kind of knows that they have Anaheim kind of over a barrel because the amount of money that comes into the city via tourism and visiting to go to the park is such that Disney can negotiate to their advantage in every single interaction with the city. They also spend a lot of money paying for people to be on the board of the city to make sure that laws are passed in their favor.
I'm not surprised that such evil comes from the Disney Corporation, but right. But what is kind of weird to me is that they have such power over Anaheim? Because to me, it seems like, what's Disneyland going to do if Anaheim charges them a reasonable rate? Like, are they going to move their whole park?
They could. I mean, like I don't know. I think that the Disney has more disposable cash than Anaheim does. So I think I don't know. I think they realize that they have an advantage in this. They're a much bigger organization, and they have an advantage in it. So the LA Times wrote this story that was a very fair, detailed, well investigated story. And of course, Disney did not like it because it makes them look bad. And Disney lashed out in a very interesting way, Michael. They declared that the LA Times was cut off. They no longer received screeners from any of their movies. Their critics did not get invited to press screenings, did not get invited to interviews. They were done. They were done with the LA Times. You wrote bad about us, so we are done with you.
Yeah, I heard about this.
And it's kind of like... sadly not unprecedented, but for a company as large as Disney to do it with a paper as big as the LA Times was a pretty big deal. And it's a very dangerous stance to take, that because you told a story about us we didn't like, we're now going to punish you as an independent, critical organization. And fortunately, the thing that's good about all this is the critics community around the country really rallied around the LA Times critics. And a lot of people said that if you're not inviting them to press screenings, we're not going to them anymore either. We're not writing about your films until they're out, which that by itself is actually probably not the best thing to do, in my opinion, because I think Disney would prefer critics don't write about their movies until after they're out. Disney would prefer that the talk about the film up until release is dictated by them through their marketing, not by independent critics. So that part of it, I don't know if it helped. But they're also like, critic organizations said Disney movies would no longer be eligible for any of their awards that they get to do at the end of the year. That really the community banded together, and Disney backed down. They released their ban of the LA Times. They backed down and apologized. But that being said, it's still like a dangerous precedent to set.
Right. It's heartening that this was shut down. That I guess that's a good thing to be said about like these awards academies and so forth, which usually I would not speak highly of, but they do, I guess, have some power over the production companies.
Yeah. They asserted the power that they had. They organized. They did it in an organized, controlled way, and they won. But I mean, still, like, you can chalk this up as a victory. We did it. We beat back the corporation. But at the same time, in the back of your head, you have to be wondering how long till they try this again. Right. How much power, like, these organizations won in this case because the backlash was so centered and strong and loud. But what if the production companies get together and want to do this in a more wide, like, controlled move on their part?
How long until Disney buys the rights to the Academy Awards and then gives itself Best Picture every year?
Yeah, and that's actually a great segue into our next news item, because earlier this week, there was also some news that came out that Disney was in talks with Fox to buy the 20th Century Fox wing of their company, the entertainment studio part of their company, which is a huge, massive business that does basically all the tentpole movies that are not Disney are Fox, besides a few WB ones. But like, we're talking X-Men movies, Planet of the Apes movies, Avatar. Fox actually owns the distribution rights to Star Wars, so that's the reason why Disney has not re-released the classic Star Wars films on Blu-ray yet, because they don't own them.
That makes sense.
So this would be a huge kind of takeover of a large part of the industry. Disney would own almost everything at that point. And I want to talk about this because I was kind of concerned when I heard this, and then I saw like the reaction on Twitter, which is mostly people being like, "Oh, Marvel movies can have X-Men again." And yeah, that's cool, but also it's bad for the industry for Disney to take everything over. It's not good.
No, yeah, I agree. It's one company shouldn't be making all of the movies. Yeah.
So fortunately, after the story came out a few hours later, there was an update that said these talks are no longer active, but the report also said that it doesn't mean that they won't be picked up again. And so this is something like Disney has slowly over the course of these years been acquiring these properties. And, I like a lot of these movies. I like the Marvel movies. I like some of the Star Wars movies. And I like a lot of the animated features that Disney and Pixar put on, but they've kind of slowly and steadily been, planting their flag in more and more sections of the film industry to a point where, if they acquire something as big as 20th Century Fox, it's over. Disney won. They control just about everything. And that is just flat out not good. It's not good for the industry. It discourages competition. They don't have to worry as much about competing with other films for weekends and all this stuff. It will be a serious blow to the industry.
Yeah, it kind of makes it seem less noble.
Yeah, and it will centralize money. It absolutely will centralize money. You'll see less and less indie films made too, because Disney will control everything.
This is kind of a trend in general where things are becoming monopolies, like airlines and internet service providers and so forth. And I thought we had laws against this.
We do. Yeah, it's just you need the government to step in and say, no, this is too centralized. You are bordering on market manipulation and monopoly. But so far we haven't really seen that much. We did, like, I think AT&T with their the cell phone company mergers and buyouts that keep being talked about keep getting shut down by the government. But we haven't seen anything on the film industry side yet. So I know, like back in I think in the golden age of Hollywood or post golden age, I think in the 50s or the 60s, like the studio system died because the government basically said, no, you can't do this. You have too much control. And they shut down all the big studios, or they made them spin off, or they released or they changed a lot of the laws around how studios could operate. But once again, it seems like time is cyclical and we're just heading back to it, but in a different 20th century type of way.
Well, hopefully there continues to be a large public backlash against this, and it never happens.
Yeah, that was the most worrying part to me, though, that it was not that Disney wants to buy 20th Century Fox. Of course they want to, but that most of the stuff I saw on the internet was X-Men and Fantastic Four, and we could finally get our Star Wars Blu-rays, and think of what they could do with all these other things. And I'm like, that's all true. It's all true. But let's think a little broader than that. Let's think a little higher level than that. What does this mean for the industry as a whole?
They'll be telling us what to think.
Yeah. And once again, it's all Disney, Michael. It's all Disney. Our next item of news is Disney as well.
Oh,
because Rian Johnson, director of Star Wars: The Last Jedi, is now going to work on a new Star Wars trilogy after Episode 9 wraps up.
What? Another trilogy?
Yeah. So this is a non-Skywalker trilogy. Here's the quote from Disney. As writer-director of The Last Jedi, Johnson conceived and realized a powerful film of which Lucasfilm and Disney are immensely proud. In shepherding this new trilogy, which is separate from the episodic Skywalker saga, Johnson will introduce new characters from a corner of the galaxy that Star Wars lore has never explored before.
Well, to be fair, it's kind of what I wanted them to do with Star Wars, is just have completely new characters and have come up with their own story for once. Yeah.
I'm of two minds on this, and I think on the one hand you're absolutely right that this is good. That let's move away from the characters we know. Let's stop making stupid prequels to movies and let's explore. This is like, it's a galaxy of potential. There's so many stories you could tell within this world. And we're not only are we doing that, but a very talented filmmaker that I quite like is going to do that. The other side of me is like, I don't want Rian Johnson to be tied up in the Star Wars world for the next decade. And that seems like what's going to happen. Like, he's just going to be making Star Wars films for the foreseeable future. And this is a guy who's very talented, who has very interesting original ideas. And yeah, maybe he can find a way to fit those ideas into Star Wars, but he's still going to be, responsible to the corporate Disney overlords to make a certain kind of movie.
The analogy I see is between that and my favorite director, Christopher Nolan, because Christopher Nolan did the Batman trilogy, which by all accounts is something he just did for the money. But he does that kind of stuff so that then he can make his own projects that he's not sure are going to be successful. So maybe it'll be the same with Rian Johnson, where this is what he's doing because it's a stable source of income for him as a director, and he can be, in the meanwhile, developing whatever projects he really loves.
Yeah, I think that's a very very good point. And yeah, I'm trying to be positive. Like, if The Last Jedi ends up great, I'm going to be even more excited about this, because he's a great director, and if he can do Star Wars right, then hey, I'm happy.
Right.
But we will see. We will see. That's it for news. But we have one more thing I want to talk about, Michael. This is a brand new segment here on the Daily Planet podcast. This is called Scott's Soapbox, where I just yell about things.
Oh, how exciting.
So some more news came out this week that AMC Theaters, the wonderful corporation that controls a vast majority of the market share, I believe over 50% of theaters nationwide are AMC branded theaters. In all their new installation screens and all their new movies, and anytime they renovate a screen, they will no longer be doing masking of their screens. Now, most of you people out there probably have no idea what that is or why that matters. So let me tell you. So movies come in different resolutions. You'll probably have noticed this if you're ever watching a movie on your TV. Some of them are in what's called flat, which is 1.85 by 1. That's the ratio of the width by the height. Widescreen, also called scope, is 235 by 1. And screens in movie theaters are built to use both of these ratios. So some of them, so you can transition between it. So you don't have to have one screen specifically for flat movies and one screen specifically for scope movies. They can do both. But what they do is when you switch to a widescreen to a scope screen, you have black at the top and bottom of the screen. And curtains will move down to cover those spots on the screen. That's what masking is. So if you're ever sitting in a movie and you're watching like the pre-show things, which are almost universally in 1.85, then the movie starts and you'll hear the masking coming from the top and bottom. It's motorized curtains that are going up and down. And this is actually really important because what this does is, even with the digital camera, even with the digital projector, the lines between where the projection image stops and where the non-projected on part of the image goes is not perfectly clean. It bleeds a little bit. The black on those parts is also not perfectly black. It glows a little bit. And what this does when you can see the letterboxes on the top and bottom is it makes the film not as immersive. It kind of reminds you of watching TV, because you're watching, if you ever sit at home and watch a widescreen movie on your TV, you see the letterboxes. And this messes with the director's frame. This messes with the image. It messes with everything. It's a less immersive of an experience. And if you're going to be paying $15 to $25 to go to a movie, immersion and the cinematic experience should be first and foremost in the studio's mind, or the theater's minds. And AMC has decided, and Cinemark has decided, that it's not worth the effort. They don't care. And they're just not going to do it anymore. And that's bullshit.
That's interesting, because obviously I hadn't heard of this before I saw it on your list of things to talk about today. But now that you say it, I am aware of the curtains. They come from the sides though, right? Not the top and bottom.
It depends.
So on the theater.
If you're in so sometimes the theater will be built for a scope screen, and if it's built for a scope screen but playing a flat image, they'll have to come from the sides. If it's built for a flat projection but it's playing a super widescreen CinemaScope, it'll come from the top and bottom. It depends.
Gotcha. And so movies these days, they don't follow a stand, because I thought it was older movies were one way and newer movies like finally developed a standard or something. But both types of movies are still made. Yeah.
It depends. It's the decision of the cast and crew, the director, what he wants to do it in. Usually more bigger, more like action intense movies are in 235 because it's a wider screen. It's kind of more all encompassing. You see more at the same time. But yeah, a lot of movies are still shot in 185 as well. So it depends. And like, I understand wanting to display both on the same screen. I understand that, but you mask it. And like, if you ask any projector, if you ask any independent theater, they will tell you, yes, you absolutely have to do masking. It is part of the experience. an image, if you as a director say, I want this person to take up the entire frame, and the point of the scene is to show that person taking up the entire frame, if you take that and then put black bars on the top and bottom, the effect of taking up the entire frame is lessened. It doesn't work as well. And like I watch widescreen movies on my TV at home all the time with a letterbox. When you get 235 on a widescreen TV, the black bar is actually pretty thick. It's a pretty substantial amount of your TV. And like, I accept that because I want to see the full frame. Like, you can zoom in on your TV. Don't do that. It's terrible. But it is less immersive of an experience when you're sitting at home and you have those bars. So when you're paying to go to a theater to experience a cinematic experience, like, that's a minimal thing that they can do. And they don't want, I guess it's too expensive. The motors break. You have to remember to do it each time. It's just another thing that they don't want to bother doing. And they don't think people will notice because they probably honestly won't, or at least not consciously notice. But
so an easier solution to this, AMC, in case you're listening, why don't you just have manual curtains, which can't be that expensive, and set it for whatever film is in that theater for the month, and then just make your advertisements look like crap because no one cares about the advertisements.
Yeah, I don't know. The reasoning behind it has to be laziness. I mean, this is the same company. Like, AMC, I hate going to AMC. They never have the lighting on the screen and this is, again, I am really specific, and that's why I'm calling this my soapbox, because I love to complain about these things, but projector bulbs are very expensive, and projector bulbs have to project a lot of light, and they dim as they get older, and they are not as bright as they get older, and there comes to a point when you're supposed to change the bulb out, but projector bulbs are expensive, so theaters like AMC don't want to do that, so they won't change the bulb out until they absolutely have to, which means that your screen is way darker than it should be. And I see this all the time, and you might not notice, like, you might just say it's a little harder to see stuff. And you never really know if that's like the intent of the director or just the projecting is not doing it well. But these big corporate theaters have shown that they don't care about projecting. And this is just another dead thing that's not going to happen anymore, to take away that experience while still charging people way too much money. It's really frustrating.
Yeah, AMC sucks, and so does Disney.
Yeah, we were really railing against corporate overlords in this one, aren't we?
We are.
And we're about to talk about a Netflix show, which is one of the biggest corporations out there as well.
It doesn't seem like they are yet, though. It's still like, oh, Netflix taking on the corporate movie theater business model.
Well, this is one of the things about Netflix, and we talk about Stranger Things. We have no idea how popular Stranger Things is because Netflix does not release numbers. There's no way, they don't tell anyone how many people have watched Stranger Things. So every other TV show gets ratings, movies get ticket sales. Netflix says how many subscribers they have, but that doesn't tell you how many people are watching the show. And they keep that information secret. We don't know. So, like, we can guess by the cultural reaction to it. We can say that Stranger Things 1 was very popular because it kind of took over the culture in the summer it came out. But we don't really know. Like, this could be a niche thing, but in a way that just happens to appeal to the groups that we hang out in.
You're right. Netflix is evil.
Well,
they're just like Disney and AMC.
Well, there you go. So
I can't trust anyone anymore.
We took way too much time with news because I had a lot to say this week. So let's go ahead and jump right into Stranger Things 2. Michael, let's do it.
Okay.
Before we get into this season, I wanted to ask you, since we did not do an episode, or if we did do an episode, I don't think you were a regular on the podcast at that point, but what did you think of the first season? What did you think of Stranger Things before moving into this season?
I enjoyed it. Yeah, it was. I like the feel of it. It does feel a lot like a kind of 80s movie, which I'm not really that nostalgic about. And nostalgic-y things kind of annoy me. But I thought they kind of, for whatever reason, the tone kind of worked for Stranger Things. I like stories in general about like a group of friends, and that's what this was. And it was a genuinely kind of not scary, but kind of creepy, interesting story about this secluded small town with this weird research center in the middle of it. So I enjoyed it.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I was not quite as enamored with it as other things. I think I am with you too, where the nostalgia beats start kind of trying to beat you over the head with it. It gets a little exhausting. It's like, I get it. It's the 80s. I get it. But yeah, I mean, the core of this was a group of friends teaming together to fight a bad evil thing, which is a good story. It's the reason why the It movie became the highest grossing horror film of all time, because these kind of stories appeal to us in a real fundamental way. It's cool to have the supernatural elements in there. It's cool to for adults to imagine what it was like to be a kid again, where you just spent all day riding around on your bicycles with your friends. And
one refreshing thing about it was that although it was based around these kids' characters, the standard thing to do would have been to have like none of the adults believe the kids.
Yeah.
And then this movie, they kind of seamlessly interlinked the adult and kids storylines, where it's like, oh yes, of course that's what's going on. There is evidence everywhere. and the adult characters just really worked instead of being an annoying intrusion like they are in a lot of children-centered stories.
You're absolutely right. I mean, yeah, there a lot of times these type of stories do take, either it's going to be on the kid side or it's going to be on the adult side, and then we're going to take time to show the adults as annoying as possible if we're kid-centric. But yeah, this Winona Ryder is a great character in the original Stranger Things, and I think still in this one as well, who legitimately like just accepts the bad things that are going on, believes the kids, believes that her kid is out there, and does something about it. And David Harbour's character, Hopper, is the same way. And we don't have to have these beats where going back and forth. It's like, no, you're just imagining things, blah, blah, blah. Like that, that's not very interesting, especially when we as the audience know that the thing is true. So that's not really engaging. And I think this dodges that very well.
I do want to specifically point out how good Winona Ryder is in this, because I think it's very hard to play the mom character who's kind of hysterical because something has happened to her kid, which is like totally, what would probably happen to a person when they lost their kid. But instead of just being an annoying, hysterical person, she manages to portray the hysteria, but she's still she's still trying to solve things.
Right.
Like you still like her character, and she's not just screaming at Hopper to solve everything.
Yeah.
She wants to do as much as she can, and is just a very, very great actress.
Yeah, absolutely. She has agency. She's solving problems. The iconic Christmas lights spelling the letters was like her entire invention. Like that, she came up with that and did it. And yeah, it's very much she is acting a little crazy, and she's constantly unhinged throughout the show, but it's to the service of the story and to the service of her character.
Right. But one thing I want to bring up as a segue into Stranger Things 2 is they tried to replay a lot of the same beats. Sort of simply to replay the same beats, to be like, oh yeah, I remember Stranger Things 1. That was awesome.
I guess we should say before we get into the details that this will be a full spoilers discussion of Stranger Things Season 2. It's been 2 whole weeks, which in internet TV world is an eternity. So we just assume that you've seen every single episode if you're listening to this. So we're going to spoil everything. So yeah, let's go. We've given that warning.
We've given the warning. So I guess where I was going with that line of thought is the maps in this one, where they have the maps strewn up all around the room. Which was, it's fine as an idea, but it feels way too much like retreading the previous season. Yeah,
there's points when Stranger Things 2 is almost nostalgic for Stranger Things 1.
It's definitely nostalgic for Stranger Things 1, yeah.
Which in a television format that's already existing off your nostalgia borders on the ridiculous. It really does. And there are, I think we have a lot of negative things to say about this show, this season of the show, but I think in general, this is still a rather engaging story. In general, I think the Duffer Brothers who created this thing had a pretty momentous task ahead of them, which was, you created this thing, it quietly was released, and then kind of took over culture for a little bit. And everyone, presumably, again, we don't know Netflix numbers. We don't know how many people actually saw it, but presumably a lot of people watched this thing. And the reason why it stuck in our cultural consciousness for so long was because people were slowly discovering it over weeks. So like this came out, nobody knew what it was. I watched it all in a weekend because I had read about it on a website, but then it like slowly throughout the summer, like picked up speed to where it lasted in cultural consciousness longer than any other Netflix show up until this point, in my opinion. And so the expectations coming into this season were enormous. The marketing campaign was massive. They were throwing stuff at us. The images, like with the nostalgia, like the show, season 2 of the show is still very nostalgia heavy, but the marketing was almost entirely based off of hitting those nostalgia notes. I mean, the whole Thriller trailer, like they were pushing hard on this. So the show was being approached like by viewers in a completely different way than the first one was. So like the fact that they managed to make something that I thought was still generally engaging and fun is pretty commendable.
Right. I think after the first season, when I heard they were making a season 2, I was like, oh no, this doesn't need to exist. Season 1 was a self-contained story. It had a beginning, middle, and end. When they try to make season 2 of things like this, it ends up, it never feels right because they're just like, well, we need to come up with something else to happen now.
Yeah.
And they kind of did that, but to their credit, like it could have been way, way worse. It was fine. This was a fine season. I enjoyed most of it, I would say. It could have been way worse since this didn't need to happen at all.
Yeah. And I think as we transition to the things we were a little more critical about, I think a lot of my negative things stem from either the fact that they are putting stuff in to set up for season 3 and beyond, and also finding a way to connect to endings from the first season that were clearly meant to just end. And I think 11 is the best example of that. I think the show in season 2 has no idea what to do with this character. And like she kind of just hangs out with Hopper, and I actually love the scenes between her and Hopper. I like the idea of putting them together. I think it plays off of Hopper's like his ongoing issue with losing his daughter, but it doesn't really go anywhere. She's just with him for a while, then she escapes, then she goes on her random episode 7, which was like universally kind of hated episode 7, and then she just comes back in the end and saves the day, and she's not really integral to anything else that's going on.
It all feels really forced, like you said. I mean, the worst things about the season were when they really transparently just tried to bring things back that people made a big deal of in the first season. And they knew that 11 was one of the most popular characters. So they're like, well, she needs to be here. But what is she going to do? Her storyline kind of played off. I think she should have just died or been trapped in the Upside Down, and maybe like they found her in the Upside Down in the last episode or something. But it was just annoying kind of whenever she was on scene. And you're right, episode 7 was completely out of nowhere. It just derailed from the main storyline, and it's just clearly setting up for season 3 or 4 or something. And
like a lot of people, I heard some people complaining about the backlash against season 7, saying you're criticizing the show for the one episode that it tries to do something different. And I'm like, I'm okay with the show trying to do something different, but do it well. And it didn't. Like, that was a mess of an episode. We didn't care about any of those characters. It was really weird and tonally different from everything, and it was just confusing.
And I also thought they really morphed her relationship with Finn.
Mike.
Mike.
Yeah.
Thank you. Because she was kind of like their friend in the first one, and then it almost seemed like in this one she was like specifically Mike's love.
I think there was some latent kind of attraction between the kids, but they were also like 7th graders, so like this is very basic level kid stuff. But they seem to press the fast forward button on that between the seasons, where suddenly like it's really romantic that he calls her on the radio 353 days in a row or something, but like we're supposed to suddenly believe that they were kind of in love. And that they were like anxiously searching for each other. And I don't remember that being established as much in the first season.
Right, and it made her seem more like she was just connected to him and not the rest of the boys, which
Right.
I felt kind of removed something from the kind of community of the friend group.
The thing that I found, like, going back to the whole number 8 and all that stuff, I really, honestly, in preparation for this, I tried to go back and rewatch the whole series, and I got kind of bored by episode 3 and gave up. But the thing I was surprised with is this season starts with 8 and starts with their heist at the beginning of the thing. And normally when you start a show with something like that, it is a thing that is going to become integral to the plot going forward. And it's just like, it's not. So you're absolutely right that's a moment where everything to do with that character was just set up for the next season and the season beyond that.
In fact, it was even confusing because I thought that the new characters who moved to town, Max and her stepbrother, were in that group because they all had masks on and stuff. And it's like, oh, they're new characters and they just ran away to this town. They just robbed something and now they're here hiding out. Where's this going to go? And it's just like, and then later you realize, oh, wait, this is completely unrelated.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And here, to wrap up my thing with 11, I think Millie Bobby Brown is a really good actress, and I think she's going to have a lot of success in her career going forward. I think she, like, for a child to have that level of skill and to achieve that, like, level of pathos, I think is great. And I understand why you look at her and you look at her talent and say, we need her in this show. But yeah, it's really frustrating. Like, one of my big pet peeves in stories is if a character sacrifices themselves for other characters, and it's this big noble sacrifice, and then the show completely, like, inverts that almost immediately. And having 11 get trapped in the Upside Down at the end of season 1, and then literally, like, in the timeline wise, gets back out of it minutes later, possibly. Like, there's no real, like, she literally just, like, does the thing at the end, dies, we think, and then wakes up in the Upside Down, and then gets out almost immediately.
Right.
And then is just wandering around outside the Upside Down. And that's just like, that, to me, that kills everything that was so powerful and impactful about that sacrifice at the end of the first season.
Yeah, it totally did. They undermined themselves a lot with that. And especially since she just kind of wanders around and finds Hopper and then hangs out with him for a year. Yeah.
Which, again, I like that in principle. I just wish it had tied in to what they were trying to do with the story of the season. And that's another part that, like we said at the beginning of this podcast, this is not a television show, not really. This is a 9-hour movie. And that means that your first act of the movie, the set up everything act, is the length of a normal feature film. And that's what we have. Like, the first 3 episodes of the show have very little things happening. It's mostly just, hey, let's hang out with these characters. Let's get to know some of the new characters a bit. Which I think is okay. I think there's a certain person who just likes these characters so much that just seeing them hang out with each other is fun for them. But I wanted a little more than that.
Right. I mean, I feel like the first season got into the action a lot faster.
Because the end of the first episode is Will is missing. Will's gone. Right. That's the central conceit of the show. Will has been kidnapped. We have to find him. And we're there like that.
Right. And I watched all of the episodes, pretty close together, not like 9 hours straight, but I think I watched them all over the course of a weekend, because at the end of each episode, you're like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen next? They had a great pace to it. But with this one, definitely not with the first few episodes. I had to watch them like several hours apart from each other because I was bored by the time the first episode was over.
Yeah. And I think the pace of the show eventually does pick up.
It does.
To a point where the last few episodes, I did watch in pretty rapid succession. But you're right. The beginning, the first 3 episodes, 3.5 possibly, are kind of a slog. And like, I understand you have to set things up. I understand you have to set up all your new characters, which actually I debate whether or not a show with this many characters needed new characters, which is a question we can get into a little bit later. But
right. Well, I mean, I think that just has to do with what we were just talking about how it was confusing that they had this opening robbery and then they introduced right afterward these new people who moved into town.
Yeah.
And you think they're related and that this is all going to lead somewhere, but actually neither of those storylines leads anywhere.
No, they don't. I mean, let's go ahead and just talk about Billy and Max then, because this is like a good segue. Right. I understand what they were wanting to do with Max. I understand you bring in this new girl into the group and you create this conflict dynamic where Mike feels like that Eleven's being replaced, so he doesn't like that. That Dustin and wow, I just blanked on the name of the other kid. What's the name of their kid? Lucas. Dustin and Lucas now having to compete over this girl, and there's a lot of comedy elements there. I understand that. I don't know why. Other than that, Max has no purpose in this story.
Right. It would have been, it's kind of a missed opportunity, I guess is the best way to put it. She could have somehow been important, or her brother or family could have been related to something else that was going on. But she was really just a bystander the whole time.
Yeah.
And just like someone else that they could pair the kids up with at the end for the dance scene.
Yeah. And I think the same exact thing with Billy. Billy's there to give Steve kind of a worse version of himself, to, I guess, play off of or learn a lesson from. I'm not really sure. Like, he's just kind of there. Maybe they're going to do something with him later, but I don't, like, none of his stuff really plays off in any kind of interesting way. Because Steve was this character, like in the first season, Steve was the stereotypical bully archetype from every 80s film. But he went through this amazing arc, which by the end of Stranger Things 1, we liked Steve a lot. We cared about Steve. He like became a better person. And now we bring in another basic bully archetype, and he's just that. We get a little bit of hints, like his dad's a piece of shit and he bullies him, but it doesn't do anything with that, really. We get an understanding of why he might be like the way he is, but it doesn't explore that.
I thought he was going to be like a major villain, like he was going to become a really twisted enemy that did something terrible. He really never did. But Steve was a great character in this season.
Oh, and that's why I like the things they did with Steve were so great, and I don't think you needed Billy there to push Steve down that path.
You only needed Dustin to make Steve great. And like the idea, like Dustin is really the only one of them without a mother or a father, right? Right.
Well, I guess technically Will doesn't have a dad either, but he's got Bob this season, so we'll talk about Bob in a bit. But yeah, like pairing Dustin and Steve together was one of the most brilliant things the show has ever done. They're two of the more goofy characters, and they play off each other so well. And he works wonderfully as this father figure. I wonder if they didn't realize what they had in the actor who plays Steve when they first wrote the role, and this season they really wrote for him more than ever, and that's why it works so well.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, maybe this was another one of their kind of attempts to pander to the things that ended up being popular in season 1, but this one just kind of happened to work out.
Yeah, it felt natural. Like it felt like he was mixed up in the stuff last season because of his attraction to Nancy and wanted to get with Nancy, and he found himself linked up with these guys, these kids. And this season, that linking comes together in a natural way, and he's very much oh shit, this again. But he plays off of Dustin so well. It's so funny. The hair stuff. I loved it. I loved it all. I want more Steve. I want a Steve show.
I don't want a Steve show because I feel like that would be like
too much.
That would be like a Joey situation. But but as a side character, he's really good. That was a super enjoyable part of this season.
But then again, what the show did, and luckily Steve is so removed from the love triangle that he almost doesn't play into it at all. But the show really tried to reverse this whole Nancy, Jonathan, Steve thing from last season. Which I appreciated in Stranger Things 1 because they kind of subverted the trope, right? Because you've got the popular asshole that the girl's dating and the sensitive, quiet friend that she should really be with. But then the show kind of subverted that by having her end up with Steve because he turned out to actually be a good guy who genuinely cared about her and helped out. And that's kind of subverted the trope a little bit. But then
it did, but I didn't really feel like it worked. Like I thought it was kind of weird that she was still together with Steve at the end of the last season.
Huh. I liked it
because her and Jonathan had like bonded so much that it kind of felt unfinished, and maybe that was the point, because at that reason they'd realized they were doing a second season or something. But
yeah. So how did you feel about how that played out this season? How we rekindled the romance between the two of them?
I didn't think it worked. I thought that ship had kind of sailed. I found their scenes kind of awkward and not that fun.
And I think that gets us into the Barb thing, because their scenes exist to retcon something because fans wanted it.
Yeah.
So Barb, I thought Barb was a fine character. I thought she served an important role of not only establishing the danger of the situation, but serving as a conscience for Nancy as she makes bad decisions. And then she died, and that was okay because she served her role in the story.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely was noticeable how little people cared about Barb in the first one, but you can't fix that now. Like,
No.
What they should have done is owned it.
Yeah.
And like had people forget about Barb or something.
Yeah.
In like a little off joke thing in one scene.
Yeah, but the internet would have rioted, and I think this is where this is the problem: is they wrote this part to appease people that want that threw around the Justice for Barb hashtag. And I think when you're creating art, you probably shouldn't do that, because people often don't fully know what they want. And this was weird. It was unnecessary. Like, all of a sudden she cares so much about Barb when she never really had in the past. And there's a way to do it. Like, if you want to do your Justice for Barb thing, there's a way to tie that in with the main plot of the story, but it's so on the outskirts of it. It's so tangentially related to everything else that's going on. Right. You've got this kind of conspiracy theory whack job who they lean up with in order to find a way to leak the information about this evil company. But the company in this version of the story actually isn't bad anymore. Like, they're actually like legitimately trying to stop the spread of this stuff. They're trying to make up for their past mistakes. They're trying to help out. Like with the whole, like the what's his name? What's the scientist's name?
I don't remember.
Well, it's Paul Reiser. I just can't remember.
Dr. Owens?
Yeah, you're right. Yeah. It's Paul Reiser's character. But like we kind of, and that kind of gets into something else, but we cast Paul Reiser in this character who is like notorious. Like, people know Paul Reiser the most from his Aliens role, which he turned out to be the asshole bad guy that was really just working for the secret evil organization the entire time. So you cast him in this role kind of knowing that that's what people are going to expect. But we don't do that. He turns out to be just a fine guy. So to have this subplot where we're trying to get justice for Barb by exposing the truth about this evil organization that has seemingly the characters, the actual characters within the organization that we get this year are good people trying to do their best with the mistakes of the past.
Right. I liked everything that happened with Dr. Owens and the company. Yeah. And it was very kind of humanizing to have like, this isn't, they don't have, they didn't, it would have been really bad if they tried to justify some really evil narrative where they're going to exploit this demon world. Because like in real life, everyone would just be like, oh God, there's no way this can turn out well.
Right.
But you're right. The reporter storyline was just the worst. And it didn't end up going anywhere because it didn't seem necessary. Like, they mentioned in the final episode that like people had found out, but the building was like destroyed and something clearly bad happened there. And it wasn't necessary to have a news story, a side news story on this at all.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would have worked well at the end of last season for there to be an exposure of all the bad things this company did, because we kind of end last season hating the company. Like, it's very much this evil government organization is bad and everything they're doing is bad, and we defeated them. That's part of the victory. It's not just victory over the Demogorgon, but it's victory over this bad organization that's caused all this stuff. But here we take a whole season to kind of reverse that and show that at least some of them, the characters we really get to see, have reversed their opinion and are trying to do right. And yeah, I didn't like it. I understand they're trying to appease the Barb lovers, but just fuck Barb. She's dead. Like, yeah, maybe they should have spent some more time in the original season showing the impact of her death, but they didn't. And that ship has sailed. And Like
it just kind of ruined Jonathan and Nancy's storyline
It
this
did.
season,
It did.
and I liked them last season.
I did too. I think Nancy's a really interesting character, and I think the dynamic with her struggling with Barb, morally as her friend, as she was like the cool chick leaving her friend behind, was an interesting thing to explore. But I just this retcon, I don't know, man. I just don't think it was necessary.
No, I definitely agree with that.
Yeah. So let's talk about the character that they're probably going to have to do justice for next season because everyone loves. Let's talk about Bob.
Was he in last season at all? I couldn't remember.
No.
Okay, I thought he'd kind of come out of nowhere.
Yeah, Bob played wonderfully by Sean Astin. I like this character a lot, and I like what they did with the character. I like what they didn't do with the character, because the first time I saw Bob, I was like, Bob's going to be evil. Bob's going to be working for the government to make sure the kid is nothing weird's happening with the kid.
He kind of screwed over the kid with his story.
Yeah, I wonder what the show was trying to say about that, because you're right. Like, the reason the kid fought back is because Bob told him to, and that's why I was convinced at that moment. I was absolutely convinced that Bob is bad news,
right?
Because he's like convinces the kid to do this, which is when the kid gets possessed. But no, Bob is just a legitimately good guy. Bob is just a superhero. And I don't know, I felt it was refreshing that like they set that up for us and then it didn't play that way.
Yeah. You know what would have been better? If they had replaced Bob with their high school science teacher. Because he was such a cool character who didn't have a lot of time from season 1 that you really liked.
Yeah.
And he was kind of all of the same things as Bob here. They could have just used him and then given him a tragic end because he'd been set up a little bit more. Instead of for this, they just kind of introduced him and then he died.
Yeah. And
then you're like, well, that was nice, but unnecessary.
And I think that goes back to my question of, did we need new characters? Did we need to bring new characters to the story at this point? Would it have been better to spend more time exploring the older characters in different ways, like putting Dustin and Steve together? That was a great new combination. I think putting Hopper and Eleven together was a great combination. Would it have been better to spend more time on those things than bring in new characters in a show that already has a lot of characters? And I like some of them. I like Bob a lot. I think Billy had potential, but I don't know. I don't know if it was worth it, because they're so not related to the central conflict of the show.
There's already so many interesting characters. You're right. See, I didn't think Hopper was very well further explored this season. Last season he was interesting because he was super reluctant he was very lazy, super reluctant to get involved in anything.
Mm-hmm.
And this season it seemed like he was just the hero right away. It's like, oh, there's Hopper. He's a badass. He's gonna solve all the things.
Yeah.
And I kind of wasn't as interested in him this season. I mean, there was the thing with 11 where they were trying to explore the daughter he lost and stuff, which thematically seemed like it should work, but because of the kind of forcing 11 back into the storyline thing, I wasn't really that interested in it either. It just all seemed like a big diversion from the more interesting things that were going on.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, so I don't know if I have much more to say, Michael. I think, when I sit back and try to think what is the overall theme of this season of the show, I actually have trouble with it. I have trouble coming, like, what is Stranger Things 2 trying to say?
I think the theme they were trying to have is that the boys are growing up. And a lot of the season wasn't related to that. But you can but by the way it kind of converges at the end with the dance and stuff, it seems like that's where they're going with it.
Yeah. Well, and there's this interesting through line of kind of like repairing, like this terrible thing happened in season 1, and season 2 is talking about how you recover from that and how you repair and how you heal from those terrible things that happened. And I think the image of 11 at the end, literally like closing a wound, fits pretty well into that theme. But I don't feel that was discussed enough. Like, I think in an effort to do this whole thing where, like, we're drawing from Aliens now, where instead of one Demogorgon, we have 20 demi-dogs. In an effort to do this Gremlins thing with Dustin, where he's now got the pet one that, of course, is going to turn bad. Of course it is. What were you thinking? We kind of lose focus on, if you want your through line to be healing and growing and finding a better place, I think it lost that along the way.
Yeah, I think you're right. And maybe the Demogorgon thing was just another, like, we got to have these again.
Right.
Whereas they could have just, the weird shadow monster in the sky that Will kept seeing was pretty interesting and creepy enough.
Yeah.
And that thing wasn't there. Like, he was kind of threatening to come through at the end.
No, they're saving it for next season. I mean, that's what they're doing. I
guess so. Yeah, it was kind of a lost opportunity. The tunnels under the city were kind of cool.
Yeah, I liked the idea that the organization, the government, thinks they're keeping this thing at bay when actually it's just secretly. It's the scars have been secretly growing throughout the city, unbeknownst to them. I like that idea. Yeah, and so. What did you think about the Will's possession? What did you think about that turn on the character and that use of the character?
I thought it was okay. I thought it was, again, very similar to last season, where they're like, something happened to Will, because something has to happen to Will for Naomi Watts to be able to do things.
It's Winona Ryder, but
whatever. Close. Same thing. I knew that. But yeah, so I thought it, at certain points within the season, it all seemed way too reminiscent of season 1.
Yeah, I agree. Something happens with Will. The other guys got to get together. They team up with a girl. It's just a different girl this time. They end up having to work with not their older sister, but Steve. They got to fight the bad things. They get in trouble. 11 saves them. There's a lot of very samey beats throughout this.
Right. And that's really all they could do, because, as we talked about, season 1 was complete.
Yeah.
There wasn't an obvious place for that to go. So the only thing they could really do is be like, well, let's do the last thing again.
Yeah.
The old Star Wars formula.
And that's an interesting thing too, because, like, after season 1 took off and became huge and they announced that they were doing a season 2, I remember they made this big deal of announcing what the episode titles for season 2 were going to be. So, like, they felt they had a good idea on the story at that point, and they were ready to release episode titles. Those aren't the final episode titles. Those all changed, all of them. So I wonder, like, how much changed in the creation of this once they actually sat down and tried to break it and realized, oh, this is going to be a lot more difficult, and we have a lot less time than we did the first time around.
Right. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, so, I mean, we were negative, but there were parts of this I really liked. There really were. I don't want to take it away from anyone that just really genuinely enjoyed it, but yeah, there were parts of this that it was just really hard for me to get over some of the problems.
Right, and the biggest problems for me were, again, whenever I felt pulled out of the narrative because something was trying to recall season 1 too much.
Yeah. There's enough of that going on with their 80s references, with them wearing Ghostbusters uniforms, which actually I didn't mind as much as I thought I did. When I saw them in Ghostbusters uniforms at the beginning, in the first trailer, I rolled my eyes big time. But it was such a small part of the overall season, like, that I didn't mind it.
Yeah, they didn't hit you over the head too much with 80s references.
And I really did like that when they were all arguing about who has to be Winston, because that was that was funny. When I was a kid, I always wanted to be Winston. I don't know why. That's just the one I wanted to be.
That was the one. Yeah, I was never really into Ghostbusters so much as Ninja Turtles.
God, we did both, but we played so much Ghostbusters. Yeah. All right, so that's Stranger Things 2. I'm sure we'll be back in a year or so to talk about Stranger Things 3 and whatever they do with it from here. I think, like, when I look at, if I look at my excitement for the series on a graph, like, I liked season 1. I was not very excited when they announced season 2. I am even less excited about the prospect of more of this.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what they're going to do. They better not have a similar Will storyline where something bad happens to Will, and then
Well, and it's like I understand, like you have that you're working with child actors, right? So you can't take your time because these kids are growing up and they're growing up fast. So you can't, like, if you have a story you want to tell, you have to write it fast and you have to shoot it fast and you have to do it, or because the kids are going to get older. So I think what the show might need is to take time, and I don't think it has that luxury.
Yeah, I think they're just going to milk it for all it's worth and then discard its corpse.
This has been a depressing episode of the Daily Fun Podcast.
You know it's going to happen.
You're probably right. All right, so let's move on to what we have been watching. Michael, what have you been watching this week?
I've been watching Dark Matter Season 3.
What is that? I've never even heard of that.
I feel like I've mentioned Dark Matter Season 1 or 2.
You might have.
On what we've been watching before, but it's a science fiction show that is on Netflix and some TV channel as well that I am unaware of. But it's kind of it's about this group of people who in season 1 woke up without any memories on a spaceship, and then they kind of just become this crew who goes on adventures. And really liked season 1. Season 2 is pretty good. Season 3, I feel like they needed somewhere else to go with it. The crew has become kind of too powerful in the realm of in the sort of rules of the world. Mm-hmm. So what they've done is they've kind of started pitting the team against itself, which has worked pretty well as what to do when your characters become so powerful that there's not an obvious challenge for them in the world anymore. Instead of just making something up, you put them against themselves. Yeah. So anyway, it's fun. I like shows. I like sci-fi shows. I like shows about like crews of people who go on adventures, and there's good characters in it. So I'd recommend it.
Cool. Where is that available again?
Netflix.
All right. So check out Dark Matter, all 3 seasons on Netflix. Cool. My thing, Michael, is Murder on the Orient Express, the new movie by Kenneth Branagh that tells the story of Hercule Poirot and his mystery.
I'm going to see this, actually. The trailer looked really interesting, but I've heard from the reviews that it's not really that great.
It's
weird impressions.
Fine. It's not great. It's kind of like a popcorn flick. It's just fun. It's very big. He goes very big with it, which is surprising. But it doesn't focus on the investigation mystery part of it as much, which is kind of disappointing. But it's enjoyable. Like Hollywood does not make these kind of movies very much anymore. Like if it's like a fun, entertaining popcorn flick, usually someone's wearing a cape or something. So for it to be just, I think it's okay for there to be this broad, fun, quick murder mystery type story with a really talented cast. And I think Branagh's Poirot is pretty good. I think he's very funny. The movie gives him an arc, which is interesting. I don't think I've ever seen that, where normally Poirot is just the guy who solves the mystery. And it puts the clues together for you, but he actually has an arc in this movie, which I did not see coming. But it's good. It's good. I didn't love it. I didn't hate it.
Cool. Yeah, it's a shame that they don't, because one of the main appeal of a mystery movie to me is kind of the unraveling of the mystery and the solving of the mystery.
And there obviously are parts where he's parsing through the clues and looking at stuff and talking through it all, but it kind of like we do that and then we rush on to something else a little bit. Right. And but it has been very long since I've seen the original movie, so I honestly didn't remember how it ended. But I figured it out. Like I remembered it halfway through the film, and I was like, oh yeah, this is the one that does this. I don't know if that hurt my enjoyment of it or not. It's really impossible to tell, but good performances all around. I liked all the actors. Johnny Depp is in it too, but fortunately for not very long. But honestly, the 5 minutes that he's in, I think he does a pretty good job.
I think Johnny Depp is horrendously overrated anyway. So
yeah. He is, but he's fine in what he does here. It's a good film. I think it's well directed. Branagh shot it in 65 millimeter film, so it's very it very much uses wide, expansive vistas as the train kind of chugs through mountains. And he directs it like we get really intimate. Like it's a very small space that shooting on a train, and I think he uses it to its full effect. We feel like we're in there with them. We're kind of cramped with these people, but we also take time to show outside and have the big expansive outside around them, which I think almost enforces the claustrophobia more because there's this big, expansive, beautiful world out there, but you're stuck on this train with a murderer.
Right. Yeah, that sounds cool.
I think you'll like it. Okay. I don't think you'll come raving about it, but all right.
Excellent.
That's Murder on the Orient Express. It's playing right now. And Michael, that's all we had for everyone this week. It was a lot of fun talking Stranger Things. I hope we weren't too negative. I don't think we were, but
I think we were fair.
Yeah. So if you guys out there have any questions or comments or just want to let Michael and I know how wrong we were, you can reach out to us via email at dailyplanetfilms@gmail.com or on Twitter @dailyplanetfilms.
And if you're not already subscribed to this podcast, we encourage you to do so and ensure you never miss an episode. You can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, YouTube, Google Play, and pretty much anywhere else podcasts can be found.
That's right, Michael. And if you like this show and all of the other shows we do here, consider becoming a patron of the Daily Planet. You can pledge $1 a month or whatever else you can afford to help ensure that we keep growing, keep making new content. We have so many ideas for shows. Our newer shows are picking up. I'm really happy with what your show, Michael, So-Called Writers, is doing. It's all very exciting right now. We're getting toward the end of the year, and I'm already looking and planning for 2018. And I think it's going to be a really good one.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm also excited about some of the projects we're working on.
Yeah.
And please consider rating and reviewing us on iTunes. Every review helps us get more exposure and introduce new people to how awesome we are.
Yeah, we are pretty awesome. And that's it. That's all we have for you guys this week. Next week on the podcast, Justice League. Justice League is here, Michael. And we're going to talk about it. Are you going to go see Justice League?
Well, it's not technically Marvel, so I'm still
it's not
deciding.
Against your code. I think you should go see it. I think we're going to have Daniel on here, who is a noted DC movie lover, and hopefully you.
Right.
It's going to be a good one. So tune in next week to find out what we think of Justice League. We'll see you next week.
The podcast is over. It's done. We hope you all had some fun. Go back to your work or your school. Maybe gym. Hey, that's cool. Regardless, just go away. But please come back next Friday.